Hi, I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream. What's the danger of facial recognition technology? Civil liberties groups say privacy shouldn't trump protection, but government and police argue the tech ensures safety. What do you think?
I'm Ahmed Chabuldin. Today we'll look at how major cities are taking very different approaches to facial recognition and explore how the Chinese government is using this technology to track citizens. But first, how does facial recognition even work? Check out this clip from a documentary I filed for AJ+. Facial recognition software creates data points that compare facial features. Databases are built from driver's licenses, mugshots, and surveillance video. The initial technology was developed in the 1960s. Today, it's replacing fingerprinting and police lineups. Facial recognition databases used by law enforcement in the US include 117 million adults. That's 1 in 3 Americans.
San Francisco, California is widely known as a tech hub, but last week, city officials voted to ban the use of facial recognition by police and other government agencies. Proponents of the tech say it could help prevent or solve crimes, but critics contend these systems are prone to error, pointing to cases in which they appeared biased against women and people of color. If adopted widely, they argue facial recognition could be abused to target rights activists or marginalized communities.
Here with us to unpack the debate, Matt Cagle serves as a technology and civil liberties attorney at the American Civil Liberties Union of Northern California. In London, Silke Carlo is the director of Big Brother Watch, an organization tackling issues related to privacy and technology. And last but not least, in New York City, Lily Hay Newman is a security reporter for Wired. She focuses on information security, digital privacy, and hacking. Welcome to the stream, everyone. Silke, I want to start with you. We heard a little bit there in the intro from that clip I played that outlined kind of the basics of facial recognition technology. But what is it and why does it seem so ubiquitous today?
Facial recognition enables people to be identified in real time by surveillance cameras, that most of which look like ordinary surveillance cameras. And it completely changes the nature of policing. So it enables the police potentially to identify and track thousands of people at any time, which puts an awful lot of power in state hands, and I think really rebalances the relationship between the citizen and the state. So, you said in your piece that it's replacing fingerprinting. With fingerprinting, a police officer has to ask you for your fingerprint. You have to have an interaction. They have to have probable cause, some kind of purpose. With facial recognition, we're all being subjected to this kind of perpetual police lineup, and we're all being treated as suspects.
So Lily, help us break this down just even a little bit further. That was an excellent definition from Silke there, but just for our international audience, so when we're talking about facial recognition, what for you makes this even more chilling perhaps than CCTV? And what's the difference between facial recognition and using some of the apps on our phone to either unlock our phone or to use facial recognition features on some of the apps we know and love?
I think the pervasiveness, as Silke says, that comes from the fact that our face is just sort of out there in the world, and we're not necessarily choosing what sees it or what it interacts with. When we use it in an app or to authenticate something that we intend, or to go into a building that we want to go into or something like that, it's an interaction where we're making a choice. But when we're being sort of passively viewed through cameras that are placed in public or sort of public-private spaces that we're just moving through in our daily lives, that becomes kind of out of control, where we're just walking along and our face is like leading in front of us in this new way.
So Matt, what concerns did San Francisco lawmakers specifically have when it came to facial recognition?
They're concerned about a lot of what's already been said. Facial recognition and face surveillance provides the government with an unprecedented power to track individuals and groups with hardly lifting a finger in terms of human effort. Imagine a world where you step outside your door and the government instantly knows who you are, where you are, who you're associating with, and even the expressions on your face, whether it's correct or it's just a guess. this is a dangerous technology. And San Francisco, at the heart of innovation here, recognized that this technology has dangers, known dangers right now. If it's inaccurate, it's dangerous. And if it's perfectly accurate, it's dangerous to our democratic rights.
Matt,
so they stepped up and they acted.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought you were done, but as you were talking, I couldn't help but wonder, as you were outlining all those things, my iPhone and Apple knows all those things, even just without the, Face ID technology that exists. But it's not just lawmakers in San Francisco, of course, that are concerned. Sarah Rashid tweeted in saying, "I am for the ban. Not only is it an invasive way to profile people, but there is no scientific evidence that facial recognition has helped improve safety or deter criminal activity." I would love to hear from you, Silky, after we watch this video from Brian Hoffer. He sent it to us. He is the man who drafted the law that banned San Francisco agencies, of course, from using this technology. Take a listen to what he said.
I think we all intuitively understand the dangers of this technology, that right now, today, it would be really reckless to use it because of its really high error rate. But the bigger concern is actually long-term, that it's going to become perfect surveillance, that we will not be able to move about society freely. I think it would obliterate our First Amendment protections like the freedom of speech, religion, assembly, and association. I can't detach myself from my face. I can't leave my house without my face. And everywhere I go, I'll know I'll be tracked.
Silky, forgive me, your name sounds so similar to Lily. I meant to ask Lily. Lily, I'm curious, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as he said, there's just a really cumulative effect of this. And I also really appreciated Matt's point that, whether this technology succeeds in becoming highly accurate, which it currently is not, or whether it stays in the state that it's in, it's really dangerous either way, because you're either sort of potentially misidentifying people or having people get involved who are totally unrelated to something, or the situation that we were hearing from in that clip where you're constantly correctly being tracked. So it's kind of either way, there's just this cascade of serious concerns.
So I want to posit something for all of you and for our audience on the flip side of this and get your thoughts on it. So we reached out to a local sheriff's office here in the U.S. Who their department is using facial recognition in the cloud. You can take a look at this website here. Facial recognition can be used to identify suspects quickly. Now, this is the Washington County Sheriff's Office, and they actually sent us a statement on what they're using it for and how it's gone for them. They say, "We can provide that facial recognition has been a successful tool for us, and it has several success stories. One thing to understand is the facial recognition software we use is not the deciding factor when identifying individuals. If we input a picture of an individual and there is a result, an investigator takes the information as a lead. This is a human-based decision, not a computer-based decision." So, Matt, when you hear this and you hear the explanation for why it might be necessary, what do you make of that?
Well, for starters, we know that from recent reporting by the Georgetown Privacy Center that many police departments are actually misusing face surveillance and facial recognition systems, and that these systems don't make us safer. So to build even a straightforward seeming face surveillance system, you need to get hundreds of thousands of photos of innocent individuals who never consented to be part of a face surveillance database. And really right now, as other guests have said, it's inaccurate technology. It's biased technology against people of color and particularly women of color. And many of the quote unquote public safety benefits are theoretical. But what we do know is that it's biased, it's inaccurate, and that departments aren't being transparent about how they're using it. Mm-hmm. There was a report recently in Gizmodo that actually debunked some of Washington County's claims and found that they're not even following Amazon's own guidance, and it's a very paltry, weak guidance. They're not even following that weak guidance in using the system. That doesn't make anyone more safe.
Mm. So I want to push on just a little bit here in this conversation and move on to the United Kingdom because police there and police departments have been conducting street trials of facial recognition cameras. Well, earlier this year, Metropolitan Police in London fined a man 90 British pounds, that's about $114, when he protested having his picture taken. Silky, talk to us about this case because you actually were there. You saw it with your own eyes.
Yeah, I did. It was really shocking, and I think really speaks to this new power imbalance that occurs when police have facial recognition. A man came out of the train station and saw a group of us standing with placards and leaflets, letting them know that the surveillance cameras in the area were actually facial recognition cameras. And a very, very small act of resistance, he merely pulled the bottom of his jumper up over his chin. And we had been tailed by plainclothes police officers who then were watching how people were responding to us informing them of the facial recognition cameras. So very quickly he was swooped by a team of police officers. They demanded to know why he had dared to cover his face. They demanded his ID. They really riled him, and he was a bit aggravated, and they gave him a fine. And this has sent chills across British society. Actually, it's been, the clip of what happened has been viewed millions of times online, and I think people are now starting to wake up to what's happening in the UK with this technology and have become outraged about it. This so-called trial by the police has been going on for 4 years now, and we've been campaigning, and we're still campaigning for it to come to an end, because this is incredibly undemocratic. It's incredibly un-British to see a mass surveillance tool like this eroding people's civil liberties and really changing the nature of society and freedom in the UK.
You know, Matt, it's interesting. We've outlined some of the dangers, and you know, a lot of people who are watching live on YouTube right now are agreeing with you, and also, you know, pointing to other things. Emre, for example, saying, I think the technology on its own isn't the danger. Thing is, it's the intent of the people who are using it. It could vastly improve our lives or turn our countries into police states. And I just want to scroll down a little bit in this YouTube chat. He also goes on to say, at the same time, the riches of Silicon Valley who are developing all these technologies are forbidding their own kids from using it. So I think this is a sign that these technologies should be regulated. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so 2 points. First, these systems, once they're built and deployed, the harm won't be, we won't be able to rein the harm in. And that's exactly, unfortunately, what we've started to see in places like China. And the history of surveillance in the United States and in other nations is a history of surveillance technologies being turned against people of color, against activists, and against immigrants. We can fully expect governments to do the same with face surveillance technology. And that's exactly why a coalition in San Francisco, not just of people who understand technology, but 25 different organizations ranging from orgs that represent immigrants' rights to racial justice to the homeless to even criminal defendants. A diverse coalition is what came together here and said, all of our lives depend on the freedom to walk down the street safely without being tracked. All of our lives depend on the freedom to not be logged into a government database because we're advocating for our own rights in this democratic society. And so while San Francisco's leaders recognize that here in the heart of technology, they need to place safeguards in place for new dangerous technologies, what really drove this was the community and a diverse community. And that sort of movement, I think, is a really important point. That is possible everywhere. That is not just something that can happen here in San Francisco. And we're already seeing the domino effect. Places here in California, but also across the United States, are considering similar bans.
Lily?
And I think the idea in terms of, you know, the potential utility for policing is that perhaps there could be a way, if the technology were accurate enough and if there were enough insight into sort of how these algorithms work and how decisions are being made in a really granular way at each stage, that it might be possible to set limits on how you can sort of query one of these databases or use one of these services, so police are able to sort of get their match or get their thing that they need without the cascading effects. But because, as Matt said, once the systems are set up, they're there and they're persistent, it's difficult to know how to set those parameters. And I think that's why privacy advocates are calling for this sort of pause, you know, particularly within the U.S. this week, but in general, because there needs to be some time to sort of societally and as a global community discuss how these restrictions might be possible, if they're possible.
So you mentioned something that happened this week, and so I want to let our audience in on it. So on Wednesday, the House Oversight and Reform Committee in the U.S. held a first hearing on facial recognition technology to examine the impact on civil rights and civil liberties. And I want you to have a listen to the founder of the organization, Algorithmic Justice League. And she's speaking to Congress about the systems, and in this clip in particular, caught on C-SPAN here in the U.S., she's speaking to Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Take a look at this tweet. And they've written out the exchange here because it's so interesting. AOC starts with, are algorithms most effective on women? So I'm going to scroll down and have you listen to a little part of that.
Ms. Bulamwini, I heard your opening statement, and we saw that these algorithms are effective to different degrees. So are they most effective on women?
No.
Are they most effective on people of color?
Absolutely not.
Are they most effective on people of different gender expressions?
No, in fact, they exclude them.
So what demographic is it mostly effective on?
White men.
And who are the primary engineers and designers of these algorithms?
Definitely white men.
So Silky, you're outside of the U.S., but you can see what it is, the discussion is, and that's happening in the U.S. What do you make of this and these systems and the inherent biases that some would say are built in?
It's a big problem, and it needs to be really carefully examined. We have similar concerns in the UK, but we have pressured the police to do some independent testing of the algorithms they're using here. Here they're using a Japanese company called NEC. And we've asked if they understand what biases might be inherent in the technology. And they have said basically that they're not interested. But there's also issues with what kind of watch lists are being put together as well. So we first saw this technology being used at Notting Hill Carnival, which is a Black British celebration in London. And that's where this surveillance, it was that community that who were used as guinea pigs for this surveillance 2 years in a row, which is just incredible. So it's also a matter of not only how biased is the technology, but who are the people that the police are targeting with it. But I also think that some of the technology issues are temporal,
right.
And I share the other guests' fears that actually the better this becomes, the more perfect a tool for oppression it becomes as well.
Yeah, most definitely. And it's worth mentioning that I have a gauge of kind of how much our audience is responding to each show that we do here at the stream, and this one has tons of Twitter threads and tons of comments on YouTube. So I think it's generally something that a lot of people are concerned about, wondering how many of the questions are left unanswered. Very quickly want to share this tweet with you before we move on to our next portion of the show. Inorganic African Feminist saying, what worries me the most is that we're asking, what can we do? A question about developing new technologies rather than also asking, why are we doing this and what is motivating us to do this? Not asking the latter enables the facade of value neutrality. And that goes on into a very lengthy thread that you can check out on Twitter, of course. For now, though, let's dive a little deeper into this conversation. Let's look at how the Chinese government is using a sophisticated facial recognition network to track its own citizens with a focus on the minority Uighur Muslim community. Take a listen to this comment sent to us by Cindy Yu, a past guest on this show.
China's use of facial recognition technology fits into a wider pattern of its attempt to roll out a nationwide social credit system, whereby every citizen is rated on their trustworthiness based on information from big data and, you guessed it, facial recognition. In Shenzhen, we're already seeing this, where jaywalkers are being recognized by cameras as they cross the road and then their identities displayed on big billboards across the road. In China's proud culture, this sort of public shaming can be very effective.
Matt, when you hear that from her there, I mean, in China's context, is there a particular fear, or are they taking this a step further? I mean, how can you contextualize that for our audience?
China should really serve as a lesson, an instructive lesson of what the United States and other nations, and frankly, what the Chinese government should avoid. One of the stories on the Chinese use of this focused on a mosque that previously, years before face surveillance, had been bustling at prayer hours. And now that mosque is desolate and deserted. This just illustrates very clearly the chilling effect that happens when people know that going outside means having your face scanned, your name logged into a government database, and maybe your identity placed on a watch list for government agents. But we would be fooling ourselves if we didn't think that the United States government had a history of turning surveillance technologies against these kinds of communities. We have seen it with everything from license plate readers, which scan vehicles, to social media surveillance, that the people who are disproportionately targeted by American governments and local and federal governments are people of color. They are immigrants. We've seen Black Lives Matter tracked, and we're seeing ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, deploy these similar kind of tools right now. So it's really important, and it's really important to act and defend ourselves right now. And that's exactly what San Francisco and now a domino effect of communities are going to do with this particularly dangerous technology.
It's actually the same in the UK. I mean, I just want to point out that even in the trial phase in the UK, police have been using facial recognition against peace activists, not the most dangerous people, and people with mental health problems as well. So we haven't even seen, this evolve towards more authoritarianism over time. I mean, the start point and the end point with this technology is really disturbing in nature, I think.
Lily?
Yeah, I also think that China is a really important example in terms of thinking about whether or not what we know about their system is true. It's not that I particularly doubt that they could develop, this sort of mass scale, ubiquitous facial recognition. I think it's probably all true. But the source on it is the Chinese government, and the source on, their ability to spot someone in a crowd of 50,000 people at a concert or something, all those sort of triumphs that they discuss, and, this type of footage that you're seeing on the screen, this is really all coming from them with not a lot of, third-party auditing or independent auditing going on. So one of the dangers you have is if the system isn't as robust or isn't as accurate as they say, maybe someone who wasn't even jaywalking gets put up on the billboard and gets publicly shamed. And that type of thing would be really difficult to bring to light. So just again, it shows the potential dangers either way, whether a system is working as intended or not. There's still big ramifications.
I think what's interesting is the idea of opting in and opting out, and when you don't have that opportunity to opt in. So I want you to take a look at this tweet. It's circulating online. Our producers found this before the show. This is Matthew Brennan, who tweets, "Wow, China airport face recognition systems to help you check your flight status and find the way to your gate. Note, I did not input anything. It accurately identified my full flight information from my face." Now that is pretty creepy to me. It's eerie, though I could see the argument that it makes things efficient. But I want you to have a listen to a clip from 2017 that shows another side of this. In it, Liu Chen, who worked as the head of an aid station in Shanghai, explains how facial recognition software can help regular passersby on the street.
We think running this facial recognition system has reduced the time needed to do searches, lightened the workload of our staff, and made our searches more efficient. That lets us help people faster when they are unsure about their identity, and helps us as much as we can to find their relatives.
So when it comes to talking about dementia patients or people who are outside and lost, facial recognition, some would say, well, it can help in that. Silke, what's your take on the beneficial uses and the opting in, but not having a choice to opt in?
I mean, it might be that there are some beneficial uses. I just haven't seen them yet. And inherently, my particular issue is the inherent risks with live facial recognition, in which there is no consent, and there is inherently a mass surveillance and a mass identifying tool. When you have a one-to-one face comparison, well, of course, there's a whole host of things that can be useful for. But we mustn't conflate that with live facial recognition, whereby thousands of people can be identified at any one time.
Very quickly, just wanted to throw this comment in there. I'm always dumbfounded personally when people say this, but Rashad TW saying, due to the large population in China, I think it's necessary since it easily reduces crime and perhaps the majority of the Chinese population accepts it. Watching over me is fine unless otherwise I am a criminal, which will make me hate the system.
Oh, We will be watching. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks to our guests, Matt, Silky, and Lily. We can keep this conversation going online by following us on Twitter. We are at AJStream. We'll see you next time.